I hope you will not place me at a disadvantage because I am a Cebuano. Presently, cases which are not necessarily decided en banc are decided by a division of the Supreme Court. The decision of the ponente in that division is considered a decision of the whole court. There are objections to this manner of deciding cases because it is felt that the decision of a division is not reflective of the sentiment of the whole court. What are your thoughts on this matter? Would you agree that all cases be decided en banc instead of by division?
May I proceed, sir?
Go ahead.
It is constitutionally designed that we are allowed to sit in divisions of 3, 5, or 7. But I would think, 3 or 5. But I would think that, and the decision of a division is considered as the decision of an entire court. It is not a subpart. It is as if the court is acting as a whole. Now, with the caseload that we have, where you have agenda items that runs in the hundreds for every session, whether it is en banc or by division, that kind of division of labor is necessary for the moment, Justice, for the moment. Now, that being said, I think the underlying problem with that concern is because decisions can conflict with the decisions of another division. In other words, there is no mechanism for the leveling off so that the uniformity in jurisprudence can be ensured. What I propose to create is that I will have a body of experts who will sit with us and identify for us the decisions that we have rendered that conflict with each other. The second thing is to either create a written manual or an intelligent software that will give red flags on when these possible conflicts are have already arisen with the petition that is before us. This body of experts, these consultants, will just alert us that there is now either an occasion for us to correct the conflicts in our decisions so that the ponente in charge and the division chairman can ensure that the end goal of trying to create a rational, standardized system of looking at substantive law is pushed. There will be an aid, there will be a mechanism to address that. So, for now, my take on this is that we have no choice. It is a practical problem, and it must be addressed by practical means. You know, if we are going to compare the judiciary to an organism, and the mind of the judiciary is in the collective membership of the Supreme Court, then that mind must first be stable and consistent. It's necessary. If we are to be believed by the people, we really have to be consistent in how we make decisions. An additional mechanism must be created because if you are going to make all of the decisions decidable only by the en banc, then you will multiply the amount of time required for any decision that is ordinarily with the division to be adjudicated. That is it. That's my answer, Justice Hermosisima.
On another matter, considering the unmitigated proliferation of deaths caused by violence of judges, journalists, and other private individuals, are you in favor of the revival of the death penalty law?
If you will allow me, Justice Hermosisima, the constitutionality of a law that may be passed reviving the imposition of the death penalty may come before us. My view of the role of a judge is a limited and humble one. It is not our role to make policy choices. We cannot replace communities' shared values with our own. Our duty is only to apply the law as we see it and to ensure that it conforms with the Constitution. Beyond that, our personal preferences and opinions should not really seep too deeply into making partisan choices for a position or another.
What has been your judicial philosophy, Mr.
I believe that justice, in order to be justice, must also be rendered in a credible manner. And that every justice and every judge must look to the North Star that the country has chosen, which is the Constitution, and uphold the enduring values that the rule of law contains. So the role of a judge is not to go into social experimentation, but rather it is to articulate those shared values in the decisions that are before him, not to replace them. Because when you see that the collective wisdom of the majority is larger than your own individual design and your own individual definition of what is right and wrong, you will see that while we may dig deeply and be radical in our work ethic and in our desire to do justice, there are limits that we must carefully observe. And a justice can only be rendered if the judge rendering it is himself credible. Justice must be lived not only by our decisions and opinions, but it must also be lived by a life, because there must be correspondence between the person rendering the opinion and the opinion's resonance to what is deep in our hearts as what conforms to justice.
Well, you need not write a book on that.
Forgive me.
Can you please shorten? Do you have any?
3 words:
shorten?
justice, if I may, vision, courage, accountability.
That's
And
better.
thank you so much, Justice.
It's just like the sign in the halls of the Supreme Court of the United States. Yeah, what you find there is emblazoned is equality under law. Here in the Supreme Court, we have, what do we have? Batas, bayan. So, how do you shorten your
For the moment,
judicial philosophy?
I will live with those words for the moment. But if the leadership mantle happens to ever be given to me, it must be a collective battle cry.
Do you abide by the motto of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, which says, no master but law, no guide but conscience, no aim but justice?
Those are beautiful words. I mean, they
Yes.
embody the best. How can one not agree with that? Oh, but one must not just agree with it. One must live it. So I do agree, Justice.
The problem there is that we write our decisions on the basis of law. All right. Law, on basis of facts, applying the law involved. Now, if the law is not in accordance with your conscience, will you abide by the law?
I would think that it would be very, very rare for that to happen. Because if you are going to look at the preamble of the Constitution, it defines the qualities of the Filipinos: God-fearing, a lover of community and of self, asking the aid of divine providence, dreaming of a just society, dreaming of prosperity. Now, if you look at that preamble and you look at the Declaration of Principles and State Policies and the more operative articles, I find nothing there that contradicts my values. So I find it hard to imagine a situation where a law that is faithful to the Constitution will also violate my conscience. That being so, perhaps what might be, what will and what in fact has contradicted my personal preference is when the facts on record and the evidence that has been given does not conform to my own preference. I have no right to impose my preference, even if my desire, my human desire is for one party to win over the other. I must simply apply the law as it is. For example, may I be given an example? In Hacienda Luisita, under the protest against the long-term ownership by a family of thousands of hectares of land was decried by several sectors as having been the product of historic injustices. There were questions about how the land was acquired. There were questions whether there was a violation of an agreement with government for the financing of the development of the hacienda. Now, you can see this in the internet, you can hear it in rallies, but the problem, Justice Hermosisima, is that we are not in a position to correct a historic injustice, if indeed it took place, if the facts and the evidence are not on record, and if it is not in issue. So regardless of what I feel about the history of Hacienda Luisita, I did not have the right to probe into something that the parties themselves have never fully litigated before us. I have to look at my role in a more humble and limited way. I cannot probe into that.
I have asked these questions, this question from other candidates, and I feel that yours has been the very adequate answer. Now, what is your concept of justice?
I don't think that...
be careful
I'm
now,
sorry.
because as Disraeli said, when you define justice, you limit it. And if you limit it, you destroy it. But anyway, what is your concept of justice?
Thank you. As long as we are mortals, we try to mirror only what are the more permanent and enduring values of our Creator. So when we look at beauty in nature and beauty in art, it is actually our human soul aspiring to see something of the eternal. Our work as judges and justices is something similar to that. When an artist paints a beautiful picture, he is mirroring something in him that he knows is more enduring. When we try to render justice, we are also trying to mimic, replicate, copy the work of God, which is really justice, because it is really His. How can anyone requite past wrongs when we are handling cases? That is not our role. But to the extent that the rules of procedure allow it, to the extent that substantive law allows us to right wrong, we do it because our conscience compels us. And our training says that to a certain extent, I can give relief. And that is a limitation of the role that we have. And we must be grateful for that limited role. If in a certain measure God's justice is being felt through our work, that should be enough. And if it talks about the work of justice, then that is the work that is adequate before us. To apply the substantive law that is before us, because everyone is supposed to understand and know what these laws are, in accordance with the procedures that have been time-honored and followed, and then to the extent possible, render relief to the cry, to the internal longings of people for justice. It is a limited role, but it is beautiful because in our human limitation, we are allowed to do that.
In that note, thank you very much.
Thank you, Justice.
Secretary Mosngi, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the outset, I'd like to disclose that the good Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno was the ponente of a decision that involved me, which affirmed the acquittal
Yes.
Judgment of the Court of Appeals.
Yes.
And I am happy to meet you for the first time, Justice Sereno. So I'll take this opportunity to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are, to me, a living proof that there is justice